Grandma died on a Tuesday that smelled like rain and old hay. By sunrise, I was back on the county road, the gravel spitting under my tires as the farmhouse rose from the fields like a tired animal. Shingles curled, porch sagged, and the windmill turned with a complaining squeak I remembered from childhood naps on the swing. She had outlived 2 droughts, a tornado, and my grandfather, then outlasted almost everyone's patience, but the farm had not survived her. I parked by the barn and let the door groan open. Dust moved like ghosts in a shaft of light, settling over tack I hadn't seen since high school. The air held the faint sweetness of cracked corn and motor oil. In the corner sat the blue cooler she guarded like treasure. Inside, only melted ice and a lone jar of peach preserves, her handwriting smudged to a whisper. I took the jar anyway. Neighbors told me my cousins hadn't driven out once since the hospital days. Busy lives, they said. I believed them until I didn't. When fences lean and roofs dip, absence becomes a kind of handwriting too. I walked the fence line and found gaps where calves once poked their noses at my shoelaces. Thistles ruled the pasture like barons. The pond had shrunk to a mirror the color of pennies. I picked up a rusted hinge, wondering what door it had kept honest, and slipped it into my jacket pocket like a keepsake. The funeral would be Thursday. Word had spread that the family would attend in proper attire. I could hear the tone in that phrase, the perfume of it. Maybe they would finally see the place they left behind. Maybe they would see each other. I locked the barn and felt the wind rise. Brief YouTube description, EN. A first-person story about returning to a neglected family farm after Grandma's passing, and the storm brewing before a very fancy funeral. Memory, inheritance, and the quiet truth written in broken fences. Image prompt EN. Cinematic scene on a rural farm, well lit with natural daylight, soft and balanced lighting. Character in country farm clothing, standing beside a weathered barn and windmill. Realistic colors, neutral tones, rich environmental detail. Tack, dust beams, thistles. Realistic background with fields and a sagging porch. Natural depth of field, high-resolution 4K quality. Professional composition, emotionally resonant but natural atmosphere, no harsh shadows, no orange tint, subtle color grading. By Thursday morning, the gravel road outside Grandma's gate looked like a dealership lot. Black SUVs and polished sedans lined up beside the same ditch where she once planted wildflowers. I stood on the porch holding my coffee, watching them arrive one by one, their doors opening like polished jaws. Cousins I hadn't seen in years stepped out, wearing pressed suits and sunglasses. They greeted each other in low voices, glancing around as if the house itself might stain their clothes. Aunt Lila came first, clutching a bouquet that looked straight out of a catalogue, white lilies, no scent. Behind her came Uncle Frank, the self-appointed executor of all things moral and financial, walking with the confidence of a man who never broke a sweat, fixing a fence. They nodded at me, uncertain whether to hug or shake hands. I gave them a polite nod back. It felt safer that way. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and old paper. I'd opened the windows that morning, letting October air swirl through lace curtains. Grandma's rocking chair faced the empty field, the same position she favored every sunrise. On the table, I'd placed her Bible and a single photograph, her in overalls, laughing beside the tractor, a smudge of dirt on her chin. No one mentioned it. As the pastor's car pulled in, I noticed something odd. Every cousin who arrived peeked toward the barn before coming inside, as if they expected it to hold some secret. I followed their eyes and saw nothing but the same warped boards and fading red paint. But when the wind shifted, I heard something metallic inside, a faint rattle like a latch moving. The barn door was supposed to be locked. Grandma's key still hung on my chain. I tightened my hand around it, feeling the weight of her secret pressing through the metal. After the service, while everyone gathered in the parlor sipping lemonade and swapping half-hearted memories, I slipped outside. The air felt sharper now, the kind that slices through black clothing and polite conversation. I crossed the yard toward the barn, gravel crunching underfoot, the sound hidden by the low murmur of voices behind me. The barn loomed larger than I remembered. Time had darkened its boards and carved deep scars into the door. The padlock hung there, dull but still solid. I traced my thumb over the iron, remembering how Grandma used to say, "Some things need to stay closed until the right eyes open them." Back then, I thought she meant the cellar or the hope chest. Now I wasn't so sure. I slipped the key into the lock. It turned with a stubborn click, like something exhaling after a long wait. The door creaked open, and a shaft of light fell across the dusty floor. Cobwebs stretched like silver thread. The air smelled of hay, oil, and something faintly sweet. Peaches again. Inside, everything was as she'd left it. The tractor, half disassembled, the shelves lined with mason jars, and at the far end, beneath an old quilt, a small wooden chest. My chest tightened. Grandma never let anyone touch that box. She'd once caught me near it as a kid and said, "When I'm gone, it'll find who it's meant to." I pulled back the quilt. The chest was simple pine, carved with initials I didn't recognize. On top lay an envelope yellowed with time, sealed in wax bearing the faint shape of a windmill. My name was written across the front in her handwriting. The barn's silence deepened. Behind me, I thought I heard footsteps in the dirt, but when I turned, no one was there. I carried the chest into the light that streamed through the broken slats. Dust floated around like pale snow. My hands shook as I broke the wax seal on the envelope. Grandma's handwriting, steady and familiar, stretched across the first page. It began simply, "If you're reading this, it means I've gone to rest. But before you bury me, there's something you need to understand about this land, and about the people who'll stand around pretending to mourn me." Her words cut deeper than any sermon that morning. She wrote about the farm as if it were alive, a being that remembered kindness and cruelty alike. She said every fence post held a secret, every tree a promise. Then came the part that made my throat tighten. "They'll all come back wearing fine clothes. Don't mistake that for love. They're here for what they think I left." I sat on a bale of hay, the paper trembling in my hands. Beneath the letter was a small metal key wrapped in cloth, and a note that said only, "For the box under the window." I turned to the far wall and saw an old window with cracked glass. Beneath it sat a smaller crate, half buried under feed sacks. My pulse quickened. When I lifted the lid, I didn't find money or jewelry, just a stack of cassette tapes neatly labeled in her handwriting. The top one read, "Play this first." I stared at it for a long time, the faint smell of peaches and dust heavy in the air. Outside, laughter floated from the porch, polite, hollow. I slipped the tape into my jacket pocket. Whatever Grandma wanted to tell me, it wasn't meant for them. It was meant for the one who still came back. That night, after the guests drifted back to their hotels and the farm fell silent again, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the same table where Grandma used to peel apples while the radio hummed in the background. I dug through the drawer by the stove and found her old cassette player, dusty, dented, but still whole. Its battery compartment was stuffed with 2 corroded AAs and a note taped inside. "In case I'm gone, use the wall plug." That was just like her, practical even in her goodbyes. I plugged it in and slid in the tape. A low hiss filled the room before her voice emerged, older, thinner, but unmistakable. "If you're hearing this," she began, "then the vultures have already started circling. Don't let them feed." I froze. She laughed softly after that, the same short chuckle I grew up with. "You've always been the one who listened. That's why I left the truth to you." She spoke about the farm's debts, how Frank had once tried to convince her to sell a portion to a developer, how Lila wanted to split the profits before the will was even written. But her tone changed halfway through, gentle and weary. This land isn't just dirt, it's memory, and it remembers who walked away. Her voice trembled as she mentioned a second key. You'll find it when the porch light flickers. That'll be my way of telling you the moment's right. Then the tape clicked off. I sat there, staring at the silent player. The light above the sink buzzed faintly, and then for just a second flickered. The room went cold. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters as if something, or someone, was moving through the yard again. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound felt louder in the dark. The creak of the floorboards, the ticking of the old clock, the restless sigh of the wind against the windows. The porch light outside glowed steady for hours, then flickered again near midnight. Once, twice, 3 times. I got up from the couch, heart pounding, and stepped out onto the porch. The air smelled like rain and something faintly metallic. The bulb swayed slightly in its fixture. I reached up to steady it, and that's when I noticed a thin string tied around the metal base. It dangled down to a small, rusted key. Grandma had hidden it right there, in plain sight, under the same light she used to leave on for me when I came home late from high school football practice. I untied the string, the key warm from the bulb's heat. There was a tag attached, written in her looping handwriting, "For what they forgot." I looked across the yard at the barn. Moonlight traced its outline like silver paint. Something about the phrase echoed in my chest. What they forgot. I slipped on my jacket and walked through the dew-wet grass, the key clutched in my hand. Inside the barn, the air was cooler now. I switched on my flashlight, its beams slicing through the dust. Near the tool bench, I noticed a trapdoor I'd never seen before, the edges hidden under old boards. My fingers trembled as I fit the key into a small lock near the hinge. It turned easily, almost too easily, as if it had been waiting all these years for this exact moment. I lifted the hatch, and the smell that rose from below wasn't of dirt or oil. It was of cedar, paper, and something faintly floral, something carefully preserved. The narrow staircase descended into cool darkness. My flashlight caught the glint of jars stacked neatly on the shelves, each one labeled with Grandma's tidy script. Summer 1985, First Rain 1991, Last Calf 2002. At first I thought they were just preserves, but when I brushed the dust from one jar, I saw it was filled not with fruit, but with slips of paper. I opened one. Inside, folded carefully, was a photograph of Uncle Frank beside the "For Sale" sign he'd planted without permission years ago. Another jar contained a copy of a loan document with his signature forged beside Grandma's. My breath caught. Each jar was a record, an archive of betrayal and memory, what they forgot. At the far end of the cellar stood an old desk. On it, a lamp, a stack of cassettes, and a single ledger book bound in cracked leather. The first page bore the words, "To whoever still loves this place." I flipped through the entries. Every line chronicled the farm's history, repairs, harvests, births, deaths, and beside each entry, a note in her hand. Frank took credit for this. Lila sold that. They'll come for what's left, but not for the work. My hands trembled as I turned another page. Inside an envelope tucked between the sheets was a folded deed, my name already written on it, signed in her hand and notarized. She had transferred the farm quietly before she died. Footsteps creaked above me. Muffled voices filtered through the boards, Frank and Lila arguing, their tones sharp. I switched off the flashlight, heart hammering. "Something's missing," Frank hissed. "She must have hidden it." I smiled in the dark, holding the deed tight against my chest. Grandma hadn't hidden it from them. She'd just left it for the one who still remembered. By morning, the secret weighed on me like wet earth. The others moved through the house with the restless energy of people who sensed something was slipping from their grasp. Aunt Lila fluttered around the kitchen, pretending to clean, though her eyes darted constantly toward the barn. Uncle Frank paced near the porch, his phone pressed to his ear, voice low and angry. When he finally turned to me, his expression carried that thin smile he used to wear at family dinners before delivering bad news. "You were out late last night," he said, "checking up on things." I shrugged, just making sure the animals didn't get in. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Listen, son, your grandmother had a way of twisting things. Whatever stories she left behind, don't let them poison you against family." Family. The word felt sour on my tongue. "You mean the same family that left her here to rot while she worked this land alone?" His jaw tightened. "You don't understand. She was stubborn. We tried to help." "By selling her farm out from under her?" I asked quietly. For a second, his mask slipped. Then he forced a laugh. "You think you found something? There's nothing left worth taking here." That's when the screen door opened and Lila appeared holding one of the old jars from the basement. Her hands shook as she read the label aloud. "Frank's offer, 1994. Inside was the copy of his forged loan, his face drained of color. "Where did you get that?" I stepped closer. Grandma kept everything. Every lie, every promise. She knew this day would come. He looked around the room, searching for a way out that didn't exist. For the first time, the mighty executor looked small, just another man cornered by truth. The funeral crowd had dwindled, but the reading of the will brought everyone back like flies to honey. The lawyer, a quiet man named Henson, arrived just after noon, carrying a brown folder and a face that had seen too many family feuds. We gathered in the parlor, the same place where Grandma had once set up her Christmas tree, its shadow still visible on the wall. Henson cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter's last testament is brief," he said, glancing toward me. "She asked that it be read exactly as written." The room fell silent. Even Frank stopped shifting in his seat. "To my children and grandchildren," Henson began, "thank you for coming to see me off. Some of you came for love. Some came for what you think is owed. Either way you came, and that's enough." Lila crossed her arms. Frank stared at the floor. "The farm and all property attached to it belong to the one who still tends the land when the rest forget it. He or she will know who they are by the sign I've already given." A murmur rippled through the room. "To the rest," Henson continued, "I leave the freedom to let go of what was never yours. Consider that my final gift." Lila stood, her voice trembling. "What does that even mean? Who tends the land?" I didn't speak, but in my jacket pocket I felt the cool edge of the deed against my fingers. Frank turned to Henson. "Is there another document? Something with specifics?" Henson shook his head. "That's all she left." Silence stretched until the old grandfather clock chimed once. It sounded almost like laughter, the kind that comes when justice finally exhales after years of holding its breath. After everyone left in anger and confusion, the house fell into a quiet that felt almost holy. I walked through each room, touching the furniture she'd polished every Sunday, the photos still hanging crookedly on the wall. The place didn't feel empty. It felt watchful. On the kitchen table, among the cassettes I hadn't yet played, one sat apart from the rest. Its label was simple: "When They've All Gone." I slid it into the player, and the static whispered before her voice filled the room again, so soft it made my eyes sting. "If you're hearing this, then they've done what I knew they would," she said. "They came dressed in their Sunday best to see what they could take. But you stayed. That's what matters." She paused, the faint sound of her rocking chair creaking in the background. "This land doesn't belong to whoever holds the deed. It belongs to whoever listens. To the wind in the wheat, the creak of the barn, the stories that hang in the rafters. You remember those sounds. That's why I chose you." I swallowed hard, the tears finally slipping free. "Don't hate them," she added softly. "Just don't let them in again. The soil forgives slow, but it forgives." The tape clicked off, leaving a silence that seemed to breathe. I sat there, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the world. Outside, clouds rolled across the horizon. I stepped onto the porch, looking over the fields that stretched like memory itself. The wind picked up, rattling the porch swing, and for a moment I swore I heard her laugh. The same warm laugh that could turn scolding into love. I whispered, "I'll take care of it, Grandma." And the wind answered softly through the corn. That night, thunder rolled over the fields like distant drums. I'd fixed a few shingles earlier, but the old roof still leaked in 2 places, leaving dark spots on the kitchen floor. The smell of rain and soil drifted through the cracks as I sat by the window, watching the lightning illuminate the yard. Each flash revealed pieces of the farm as if time itself were blinking. Barn, porch swing, the rows of corn she never gave up planting. Then I saw headlights creeping up the drive. My heart tightened. No one came here at night, not since the reading of the will. I stepped outside, boots sinking into wet earth. Frank's black SUV idled near the gate. He got out, umbrella in hand, his silhouette framed by the lightning. "I'm not here to fight," he shouted over the rain. "We just need to talk." I didn't move. "You already said enough." He came closer, rain streaking his suit. "Look, maybe we handled things wrong, but that farm isn't yours to keep. You don't even live here." "I do now." He exhaled sharply, glancing toward the barn. "You think she was some saint? She hid money, our money. I know it's here somewhere." Something inside me broke then. "She owed you nothing. Every nail in that barn, every seed in that soil, she paid for it with her hands while you pretended to care." Lightning cracked again, white and violent. Frank's face twisted, and for a moment I thought he might lunge. Instead, he turned and stalked back to his car. "Fine," he said, "but you'll regret it when the bank comes calling." As his taillights disappeared into the rain, I stood there in the mud, the thunder fading, the wind carrying only her words. The soil forgives slow, but it forgives. The storm passed just before dawn. The world outside looked scrubbed clean, as if the rain had tried to erase every trace of what came before. Mist curled over the fields, soft and silver, wrapping the fences in silence. I brewed coffee in Grandma's old percolator, its rhythmic hiss and pop echoing through the kitchen like an old song. When I stepped outside, the yard glistened. The barn door, still half open from last night, creaked gently in the breeze. I walked toward it, boots squelching in the mud. Inside, sunlight spilled through the cracks, falling on the old tools, the tractor, and the open trapdoor to the cellar. Everything was still. I looked at the shelves lined with jars, their labels blurred with moisture. For a moment I imagined her standing beside me again, hands on her hips, that mix of pride and mischief in her eyes. "Told you the truth would keep longer than peaches," she might have said. I smiled. Outside, I found Lila's bouquet still lying where she dropped it the day of the will, white lilies now wilted and brown. I gathered them up and walked to Grandma's grave by the oak tree. The soil was damp, dark, alive. I placed the flowers there and knelt. "Everyone came dressed for inheritance," I whispered, "but you dressed me for work." A crow called from the fence post, sharp and echoing, as if answering. I looked out over the land, the light growing stronger with each passing minute. The fields were bruised but not broken, they just needed tending. I took a deep breath, the scent of rain and earth filling my lungs. The world felt quiet again. Not empty, but waiting. And for the first time since she died, I felt ready to stay. By afternoon, the last of them returned, Frank, Lila, and the rest, dressed in dark clothes and polished shoes once more. The funeral had been short, polite, and hollow, like a play where everyone forgot their lines. They stood by the grave, umbrellas shining under a pale sun, whispering about what to do next. I stayed back by the oak, hands in my pockets, the deed folded inside my jacket like a heartbeat. Leela approached first, eyes red but dry. "She didn't mean to leave you with all this work," she said quietly. "You know that, don't you?" I nodded, though we both knew she wasn't talking about chores. Frank hung back, his tie askew, the sharpness gone from his voice. "It's just land," he muttered. "No use fighting over it." "Then stop," I said simply. For a long moment no one spoke. The wind moved through the cornfield, bending the stalks in slow unison. I thought of Grandma's words, how the land remembers who walks away. When they finally left, their cars rolled down the gravel drive one last time, their wheels throwing up dust that glowed like smoke in the sunlight. The farm grew quiet again, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty but full of echoes, of forgiveness, of the steady hum of something beginning again. I walked back to the porch, sat in her rocking chair and listened. The barn creaked softly in the wind. The fields swayed. Somewhere a single note of birdsong rose through the air. I whispered, "You can rest now, Grandma." Then I looked straight into the horizon and spoke to whoever might someday listen. "Thank you for hearing our story. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this."